Hi, I'm Dave Barnes.
And I'm John McLaughlin.
And welcome to Dadville.
Dadville is a podcast where we talk about life, love, and the pursuit of awesome dadding.
It's funny thoughts and deep talks.
So please, enjoy your time here in Dadville and enjoy this episode with Dr. Allan Peetz.
Dave. What?
Sorry, sometimes I just start laughing before you get to the punchline just to speed you up.
Oh.
So,
Okay.
can we just, are you done?
No.
Because I got something I wanted to tell the people
Okay, yeah,
about.
go ahead.
You know, AG1, Dave,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a daily self-care for me.
Oh. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know I'm doing at least one good thing for my body every day when I start my day with AG1. That's kind of how I look at it.
I'm not just saying this because you said it first. I was going to say it anyway, but me too. It gives me the vitamins, minerals, and gut health I need. That's why we've been drinking AG1 for years.
You know, AG1 is a nutritional supplement made with bioavailable ingredients that your body can actually absorb.
Yeah.
Right? What good is a supplement if your body can't absorb and use it, Dave?
What are we even doing out here? Oh my gosh. Just one scoop provides whole body benefits like gut immunity and stress support.
Well, and that one scoop is nutrient dense and packed with nutrients.
Wow, John.
Yeah.
Start with AG1 and notice the difference for yourself. Whoever's listening out there, it's a great first step to investing in your health. And that's why they've been a proud partner of Dadville for so long.
Try AG1 and get a free bottle of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs. You can go anywhere with those with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/dadville.
That's a $48 value for free if you go to drinkag1.com/dadville. Check it out. Do it slower. Check it out. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Dave, do you mind if I kick us off here?
Oh, look at this.
Because we have my friend on.
Yeah.
Now, we've had a lot of your friends on. We've had some mutual friends on.
Yep.
But I wanted to have on Dadville I wanted to have a guest who was only my friend, and I didn't care who it was.
Well, I'll be the judge of that.
That's true.
Yeah.
I should. Yeah. I'm your friend.
Yeah.
You let me know by the end of this interview if you're my friend.
Yes, we are definitely friends.
We have my friend, Dr. Allan Peetz.
Yes.
Does that feel good every time you hear somebody say that?
I mean, when my kids say it, that's what
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unless they're...
Is that what they call you at home?
Yeah.
Doc?
Yes.
Doctor?
Dr. Dad.
Without eye contact.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, too much eye contact, and it's like, hey,
Yeah.
easy.
Whoa. Who do you think you are?
Easy.
Who do you think I am?
All right, so Allan and I, we know each other from church. We go to the same church, but I think that we met at a mutual friend's house, who he's also a doctor.
Yes.
We met at a guy's hang at Steve's house.
Steve's house, yes.
And it was a memorable night for me. I don't know if it was memorable for you, but I feel like it was a memorable
Because you could
night.
say now you had two doctor friends.
Yeah.
You got in the car.
Sort of. Because I was at this guy's hang.
Oh, you're serious?
Yeah, seriously. I'm at this guy's hang. It's at our friend Steve's house. It's down in his nice basement. And I got there. And
Can we just say I like that you qualified the basement? Because people... If you say basement, I don't know.
Yeah, I need to say nice
Like,
basement.
are you guys, sneaking little sips down there? What are you
There
doing?
are windows.
You're dodging brown recluse?
Yeah.
You know? Like,
Is there lotion?
Not this basement. No. This is... And he had like a really nice charcuterie spread.
Just let me
there.
back up. The lotion thing was
I know what that
Silence
is.
of the
No, I
Lambs
know
thing.
that.
I just wanted to clarify
Let's-
that because we
lotion
skipped
on
right
that.
over it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You're a doctor. We're not going to question a lot of things you say today because we are not... It's rarefied air for
Okay.
us.
Yeah,
we're,
right.
we're out of our
Okay.
comfort
But
zone.
anyway, I remember being there and being like, wait, he's a doctor. I think he's also a doctor. I was meeting a couple people for the first time there, and I remember thinking, I'm in an adult party. These are adults.
I think
here.
I think I told you that. I was like, listen,
John, it was a reprimand.
That's
you were
right.
like, listen
and you
to
were
me.
like, you need to go home and change. This is an adult.
Yeah, it
party.
was definitely you were getting a talking to.
Yeah.
I remember that part. Yeah.
So anyway, and we've become friends ever since. I'd
Yes.
say best friends, but and then I think our friendship went to the next level last summer
Yes.
when you purchased a bike
Yes.
out of the blue, and then you went all evangelical about bikes, and you were like, "Do you have a bike? Wait, John? Do you have a bike?
I
You
did.
should get a bike. Let's ride bikes together."
Yes. I think I was saying it sarcastically to everybody.
Okay,
John didn't read
different
the
schools of
room.
thought on that.
He shows
But
up the
then
next day.
You signed up for this triathlon. You got me to sign up for
Yes.
a triathlon, and that you have gotten me into the world of triathlons.
Well, you've done. It was. Yes, that is correct. I thought we were going to go ramen at the Otaku first. That
That's
was
true.
where I
Ramen
felt like
and
where
triathlons
we
are
went
sort
from
of the-
ramen,
Mm-hmm.
where we go out to get lunch every once in a while.
Yeah.
when we can. But yes, the triathlon, and
Which is actually, and I should also say, Dr. Allan Peetz is a trauma surgeon. And I was going to make the joke. I didn't set myself up for it that the triathlons have been the biggest form of trauma in my life.
Yeah.
So you're bringing trauma to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dave, you said you could cut stuff out, right?
Yeah, no, we haven't started
we should
recording
be
yet.
good.
Yeah.
No, we aren't recording yet.
Everything in red right there we'll cut out.
We'll just.
Yeah. Any of John's friends would do a test run just because I want to make sure it's going to work. And then-
Well, John and I were doing I was training for this triathlon. I had never done one before. John, I did not know, and nor did I ask, what kind of experience he had. And he turns out to be a swimmer. Now, I'm originally from Hawaii, so if he would have asked me, "Do you know how to swim?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm from Hawaii. You're an idiot. You're an
Everybody
idiot.
knows.
You're an idiot."
y'all are born into the ocean.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. It
Water
turns
birds.
out
Yeah, everywhere.
All around the island.
everywhere. Yeah.
we're just swimming the whole time. It was immediately obvious, and I think the first time I went real swimming was with John. Where like my goggles snapped off, and he was there as like basically my handler at the pool, being like, "Here, we can help you out."
John is just short of gills.
Yes.
He's a
And
very
it was
aquatic
so
guy.
frustrating to watch this man who just destroyed all of us. Me. I think everybody else destroyed me as well, but I made it through. My goal was just to finish.
No doubt.
Yeah,
no
of
doubt.
course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's been.
And you
great.
got your bike.
I borrowed my sister's bike, which
that
I
makes
still
sense.
ride.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
shout out to Megan up in Indiana for
Megan in
loaning
Indiana. Yeah, son of
her bike to me.
That makes me want to ask a lot of questions that I'm not. Would just show my idiocy, so we're not even going to do that.
Like, does it have like the streamers?
I don't. These are the
handlebars?
questions. Yes, you know me well enough.
Not my words; those were Dave's. Even
Yeah.
though he didn't say them, I could just tell he was going there.
Well, I know we're not going to talk about this like bike safety today. That's not what we're talking about today. But,
No, but
I did notice, because we oftentimes ride in the morning and like very early in the morning. It's dark outside. It's nice to have lights. I have lights everywhere on my bike because I'm a trauma surgeon. That's what I think about. I have a helmet, and then I have a helmet for my helmet.
yeah,
Yeah.
You have the NFL thing that they're
That's
doing
right.
now.
That's right. Yeah. I've actually, you guys, you can't see stuff on podcasts, right? That's just,
No,
just a
they
hearing
can't.
thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But we're all wearing helmets right now. Just for safety
John and I
reasons.
do.
Yeah.
just in case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just in
Insurance.
case. But he had homemade lights on his, I think it was homemade. You made your own lights for your bike. So they looked like
It is
lights,
true.
but they didn't work at all.
They didn't. I think I only got these lights because the first time we got together to ride, you had these like legit lights, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah, they
I
worked.
guess
They
that
worked.
makes
They turned on
sense."
and
By
off.
legit, I mean they emit light.
They were lights.
Yours came from a kid. Like it was just like,
I
hey,
just
what do your kids
got
do
on
at
my
home
phone.
when they're home from school? Go mail order in these science experiments. You don't expect them to work.
That's what it
Yeah.
was. It was one of those Kids Cove boxes. Make your own light. You know, and you kind
Find some like fireflies and put
Yeah,
them in
yeah,
a
yeah,
jar.
yeah.
And strap them on your
Yeah,
bike.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty embarrassed at how terrible my lights were.
I gave you lights at one point because I was like, that's
You did.
Because if you
that's
get
true.
hurt, like it looks bad on me.
You have so many lights.
If you get hurt, it looks bad on me.
Like if you get hurt, I have to go to work.
I gotta go.
I got the day off.
That's so funny.
Okay, so So for the listener, I feel like this might have been me before you and I became friends. I think if I heard somebody say, I'm a trauma surgeon, I don't exactly know what that
that's fair.
means.
Yeah.
So for the listeners who are like, I don't exactly know what that means, what is a trauma surgeon? What does that mean?
One of my partners describes it as my job is to get people. He describes it as the job of the trauma surgeon is to get people out of the emergency department. So as a trauma surgeon, I also do emergency general surgery. So like appendectomies and gallbladders and hernias and things like that. But as a trauma surgeon, my job is to take care of people who are injured. And oftentimes come through the emergency department, usually come in through the emergency department. And sometimes they're, falls. We get a lot of falls. But also motor vehicle collisions, motorcycle collisions, and gun violence and stabbings and assaults and things like that. So that's my job. I'm a surgeon, so a lot of people get confused between emergency medicine and trauma surgery. So my training is I did a 5-year general surgery residency, and then I did 2 years of fellowship. Emergency medicine is a little bit shorter. They're not surgeons. Very important job. They do a lot of the kind of, the stuff that you see on TV, ER kind of.
Right.
I don't know. ER is not a show anymore, I guess. No, right?
Is it not? I actually don't know. Probably
it's on the
not.
television.
If it's in reruns, it's always a show.
Yeah,
It's
that's a good
always
point.
show.
Okay.
Once a show, always
You
a
get
show.
it.
Yeah. Do you guys ever have like the trauma surgeons and the ER doctors have like a softball league against each other?
Yeah, it's like the fire department and police department
police
kind of thing.
department.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when you do a job like that, I would assume that there has to be a certain type of person that does that. Meaning, like when I think of like Green Berets or firefight, like people who have a certain bend have to be drawn to that. Because I mean, like 70% of your job is like high intensity. It's not. Again, it's emergency.
Yeah.
So by nature,
you're not like scheduling a surgery.
Yeah. So is that? Do you find that one with yourself, but with your, with people you work with, is it kind of everybody's got a little bit of the same bend?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of us. So I'm also a critical care physician. So almost everybody who's a trauma surgeon is also a critical care doctor now. So we're double boarded. So I did a fellowship in critical care, in surgical critical care, as well as in what's now known as acute care surgery, but it involves trauma surgery and emergency general surgery. I liked I liked medicine. Mm-hmm. I also liked being a surgeon. I don't like being in the operating room for 20 hours straight. So like plastic surgery or cardiac surgery just wasn't for me. I don't like that kind of thing. I do, there's that like Jungian archetype. Yeah, we didn't know we were going to take a turn to the Jungian archetypes. I was
excited when this started.
Yes. We'll cut this out as well.
My favorite book of his, by the way, is Forever Young. Go ahead.
Yes, that's a great one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a collab with Rod Stewart.
It was.
He was the ghostwriter.
That was a soundtrack.
Yeah.
I'm trying to come up with another Rod Stewart spinoff here, but
maybe
you took it.
Yeah.
We can't. Well, I left a gap, and no one was going to pick
we
that
can't
up.
offer much here, Allan, but we can give you these non sequiturs into oblivion.
I love it. I'm still trying to come up with the Rod Stewart one. It'll come up to me at the wrong time later.
Just text it later.
We'll edit it back in.
Text it. Send it on voice.
I like the medicine as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be able to do the critical care medicine. And I like doing big operations on people who can potentially benefit from them. I always felt, and this is not fair to my surgical oncology, like the cancer surgeon doctors, but where I did training, which was I did my residency at University of Chicago, and big cancer hospital, amazing surgeons there. I felt like sometimes I felt like the cancer operations were oftentimes you end up doing cancer operations and then they die of cancer later, which is a real cynical, and it's not necessarily true. It just didn't fulfill me.
That part of like, I did something and now they're better.
Yeah.
Like they can move back into the world.
Yes.
Yeah. You want to make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that in trauma surgery every time we operate, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little bit later. But oftentimes, especially I did my training at University of Chicago, my our trauma rotation was at Cook County, which is actually what the show is based off of. University of Chicago has its own trauma center now, but Chicago, very violent place at times, especially in the summer. So did a lot of trauma surgery, did a lot of surgery, took care of a lot of people that were hurt or victims of gang violence and inner city kind of turmoil. And I liked taking care of that population. I also liked taking care of a population where I didn't have to worry about referrals. Like I'm not having a network with gastroenterologists.
Yeah.
Like I get my referrals from the city, I guess.
Yeah, right.
For lack of a better word. And I didn't want to have to worry about insurance and stuff like that. I just don't deal with that. Not that I don't deal with that a little bit now. It just doesn't happen in the immediate. And you end up being there and being kind of to go back to the Jungian thing, was like, every little boy likes to be, not every little boy, I just happen to be somebody who likes to put on a cape and pretend I'm a superhero. That's what it felt like to me. Still feels that a little bit that way.
John, that's enough. You're just going to keep going on and on like you always do.
I'm sorry.
John, hearing you, a verified coffee nerd, talk about the greatness of Methodical coffee is enough to send me straight to the kitchen to start getting brewed that perfect blend that I love so much.
Dave, I'd like to take the credit for that, but really, I think what you're most excited about is the way Methodical coffee is roasted, blended, brewed, served, and perfected.
Yes, you're right.
So that when it hits your lips, it's magic every morning. Am I right?
Shh, I just sang it.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to charge you for that because it's sort of like a
I didn't ask
way to
for it,
show
though.
for you. And Methodical has resolved the headache of having too little or too much coffee from your traditional time-based coffee subscription. Golly. Bored much?
Right.
With Methodical, you can subscribe by usage.
Now, let me explain it because Dave didn't. Receive a free smart scale that tracks your coffee consumption and triggers your next order right at the perfect time. Now, you're thinking, how can it do that?
Well, I was going to say, how can it
magic.
do that? Oh.
Yeah, we're living in the future. So you always have the perfect amount of coffee on hand, worry-free.
I'm tired of worrying. Bobby McFerrin told me years ago to stop, but it's hard.
Don't worry.
This makes it easier. The best part is you can receive 20% off your first bag and 10% off all subsequent bags. Again, John, that just means the bags after.
Yeah.
With no code needed when you try the free Smart Scale.
Now, Dave, as you know but failed to mention, we also have our very own Dadville blend.
It's hard to say. John, you're so excited. Do you want me to tell him? It's
filled with this is my thing. It's filled with hints of chocolate, graham, and brown sugar.
Yep.
It gets us going every morning.
I have heard rumors that in southern Mississippi they use it as currency.
Yeah.
That's how good
No,
it is.
that's true.
My uncle bought land with 5 bags. I can't.
5 bags an acre.
Yeah, well, there it is, okay? Methodical, guess what the mission is, John? Do you want to tell them?
Well, they're trying to connect people to the beauty of life.
Yep.
Through what?
Coffee experiences for people like who, John?
You.
That's right. Methodical, to give it to them, what have they been doing?
They've been roasting, but not just roasting. Anybody can roast.
Yeah.
But who roasts and hosts better than Methodical?
Nobody. And if they introduce cars to it, it's going to be a classic roast, host, and coast. You know what I'm saying? 2015, John.
That's right. On their site, Dave.
Yeah.
Another thing you failed to mention.
Oh, please.
You're going to find brew guides, okay?
Yeah.
And what are those brew guides going to do? They're going to teach you how to turn your coffee brewing chore into a beloved ritual. Now, you can receive 20% off your first bag and 10% off all subsequent bags. No code needed.
Last thing, guys. Craft a cup you'll love with Methodical coffee. Do it.
Well, it feels like obviously when you are at work working on a patient, it is in the most intense scenario. Like I was saying earlier, you're not scheduling anything. Like it's coming in. A lot of times it's life or death, and you're making quick decisions, which I think there would be pros and cons to that. And this sounds like a pro would be all the fat, all the BS is trimmed away. There's not time for it.
Yeah.
No one's worrying about insurance or any of these other things.
Not in the moment, for sure.
So there's a simplicity to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you find in general that you're like unflappable? Do you find that you're kind of like, you like high intensity things, that you like go as opposed to sit and contemplate? Or is that kind of a occupational centric thing with you?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I actually tend to be. So one of the other things I do, my focus in research is on bioethics. One of the faculty members where I work in the ethics department. So I like that kind of stuff. It's not particularly surgical per se, but like I have both sides of those things. I would say, like, I have 3 kids. I'm getting older. My desire for those things is like what I get out of them is different than when I was younger. So like I don't know, unflappable. That it would be such a cool thing to say. I think I give the impression that like I'm not stressed about things. Although people who know me know when right. when the stuff is hitting the fan, that okay, like everybody's got their limits.
Yeah.
So.
But there is, like, I'm always so fascinated by the research that shows, like, people that work in whatever you would call those kind of jobs, like high intensity, seconds matter, that they really, I mean, like, studies show, like, there are people who just, like, they just kind of calm. They're like, give me the ball. Or give me the, like, I know what to do in this moment. I'm ready to do what I feel like I can do. And there's other people like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
I would assume probably you and a lot of your,
I think we're all a little bit like that.
Yeah, a little bit like that.
We actually calm down a little bit when it's louder and more chaotic. We actually get a little bit more in the zone.
Yeah. Which is
what you,
that's what I want to hear. Yeah.
I don't want somebody like me who's like, I can see both sides of these arguments. We could go this route. I don't even know enough to finish that.
I was so excited to see how that was going to play out. I was like, I just want
one
medical.
With Pitocin or penicillin.
Yes.
I'm sure you have to make that
Children's Tylenol is always hovering.
Or do we do ibuprofen? Do we do liquid or chewable?
There we go.
These are this is where I start to panic when my wife asks me about that. With my kids. She wants me to be my kid's doctor, and then I just panic.
Yeah, you're out. Yeah, you're out.
I'm out.
It's too high stakes there. I remember I read this book years ago called Do No Harm. Henry Marsh is his name. He was a British brain surgeon, and he was kind of toward the end of his career, and he wrote this book called Do No Harm. It was a great book. It was really fascinating because I think it was one of those books that I picked up like at an airport when I didn't have a book and I'm catching a flight. I just go grab a book. And it was really, really...
You have to pay for those.
Usually. I was about to make that exact same.
I don't think you do if your flight is about to leave. I don't know. It's frowned upon, but I think it's fine if you run.
That said, I can't go in O'Hare.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Midway all the time now. But I remember him talking about... He said in every surgeon's mind, there is a graveyard. There's like a section of their brain. And he's like, in my mind, I have this graveyard of all the patients that have died under my care, in the surgery. And how I think he did a really good job of like talking about how you just have to deal with that. Like that's just part of the job. And again, his situation is different because he meets with these patients. He's looking at scans. He's looking at a calendar. He's scheduling something, and then they do the surgery. You have, in my view, the same responsibility or the same stakes, but you don't have time to think about, to weigh the options. I mean, technically you have time, but you have like a couple seconds or whatever. Like, how do you, when I describe that, what Henry Marsh was writing in his book, are you like, 100%? I totally.
This is actually a really famous, that what he was borrowing was from, and I'm forgetting, there's a very famous French surgeon who talks about every surgeon has a graveyard that they go to pray to every once in a while. And I definitely have those. Like, they're like every surgeon makes mistakes. Every surgeon has hurt somebody doing something. Unless you haven't, and you, like, they're, and not every emergency is the same, right? Like, not the gunshot wound to the heart is a much faster emergency than the gunshot wound to the abdomen, usually. usually. You don't have a whole lot of time to reflect, but those I would say, like, especially as I've gotten older, and I've been doing this for about, forget about residency, but I've been doing this for about 10 years. Like those graveyards, like the people who you might have hurt, or like or you have hurt in the past because of mistakes or an experience or whatever, they flash up. And what the original quote was about, and it seems real dark, but it's like, it's very real, is that the reason you go to the word I don't speak French, but the word he used in French was to pray in front of these tombstones, was the reason you go there is because they teach you lessons. Like, they're hard lessons to learn, but like that's I think that's the job. Both of you guys are dads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the podcast is Dadville, right?
Yeah.
So like,
you just found out you were at the wrong podcast.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This one's called Surgery Town.
Surgery Town. Yeah. I'm still trying to work on that Rod Stewart to come back here. What's it called? A callback? Whatever.
You're gonna get it.
Yeah, we'll get it. I'll get it. But but like, I think parenthood is a lot like that as well, where like,
right,
there are definitely times when, like, I mean, embarrassingly, it's usually like when I've lost my patience or like done something that has, you go back to your older self to be like, okay, that's not a mistake I'm going to make again. It's not the same person, because your child's different.
Right.
And my patients are my children, but like, I care for them and I have a responsibility to them that's much similar to that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best metaphor I could have for that.
Before we get into talking about, gun violence specifically and your sort of unique seat at, gun violence is obviously a topic in the zeitgeist for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but you have a unique role in it, because while we can have conversations about gun violence, and whenever there's, elections coming up, it tends to kind of come to the forefront again. You are the person who, when there are victims of gun violence, here in our city, like,
Mm-hmm.
they're put in an ambulance and they're taken to you. So
Yeah.
you get to see it. You're seeing the effects of it day in and day out, which is why we wanted to have you in to talk about this. But I just want to say, because it can be sort of a hot button issue, I just want to say, for the listeners listening, we're not making some kind of political statement here. There's nothing about this that has to do with politics. I mean, it feels appropriate to say that, but it also, to me, is frustrating that it even needs to be said, that disclaimer even needs, to be said. Like, I think, from my view as a 41-year-old dad, the stats are the stats, and we'll get into some of that. As a dad, I find it frustrating that, with gun violence, if you would take the stats from gun violence and put it on anything else, like, let's say vape pens
Mm-hmm.
are killing people and injuring people at the rates that guns are, or like Stanley Cups,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It would be
Triathlons.
triathlons. It would be,
If I did them, there would be potential.
exactly. It would
could
be
get
a no-brainer. We would be like, all right, we need to take a look at triathlons. What is
This
happening
Dave guy,
with triathlons?
we lost.
And
almost
specifically musicians participating in them. Maybe that shouldn't be allowed. But if it were vape pens or something like that, there would be more of a clear black and white. Not that everybody would fall on the same conclusion, but at least the will of everyone to be like, hey, let's research this. Let's take a look at this.
Yeah.
I think that it would be a lot more clear. And with guns, sometimes it doesn't feel like it is that clear. And when you start talking about guns, gun regulation, gun violence, all that kind of stuff, it can be just a hot button issue that people can get up in arms about it. So I just want to say for the listener listening, whatever your feelings are about guns, gun rights, if you're a gun owner, if you would like to eliminate guns from the face of the planet, just take your thoughts, set them aside, listen to this conversation as I'm going to take my thoughts and set them aside. We're going to have this conversation. When we're done, we can all pick up our thoughts, and you don't have to change anything about how you feel, or maybe something that's said in this conversation might inform, how you feel.
Yeah.
But my goal here is just to learn something, and hopefully some of our listeners can learn some things that we didn't know.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up because I'm not a politician, and so I'm hoping
you can
not
say
to make this
whatever you feel.
Well, not only that, but I'm not interested in having a political argument. I'm not the right person to have a political discussion. I do honor that it's more complicated than either side would any sort of extreme that simplifies an argument into one way or another. I'm just hoping to present some facts or whatever.
Right.
But I don't have an agenda per se.
Well, and kind of to the point.
Said everybody right before delivering an agenda.
That said.
Right.
Now that said.
Well, and, as we were saying earlier, how like the nature of what you do trims away all the extracurriculars, the BS around stuff, and you're just dealing with a patient who is in need of care.
Sure. Yeah.
That's why I think that your views on gun violence specifically are very important, because you're like, look, you can say whatever you want to say about anything else. I'm just telling you what I, as a trauma surgeon, am seeing day in and day out, day in and day out.
Yeah.
These are the effects of it. And again, a lot of us can be so removed from that. And I think it's important for us to be reminded of what is actually happening, what the actual results and effects of gun violence are.
Well, and I hope that's informative. I think that I think when it comes to these things, especially these things, I mean, topics where people feel strongly, where there's high emotions, there's deep feelings, there's there's history that goes beyond, it goes generations, and that's important. I mean, on both sides of the argument or whatever. Yeah. Actually, there's more than two sides. There's more than two sides. Exactly. Somebody mentioned the phrase like I sometimes can, Allan Peetz, can help bear witness for some of those things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful to people.
So what is it in this subject? Like what is it that compels you so much? Like what is the thing that when you think about it, that that you give these talks or you come on a podcast like this and talk about it, what is that thing? Like what is it that you feel so burdened by?
Well, really it's being a dad. Really, it's being a dad and being a trauma surgeon. So, a lot of the safety things, a lot of the things that are out there that people agree on that have been hard to. We just said we were going to talk about politics, but one of the things that is hard to pass into legislation are actually things that people agree on quite a bit about, like safety, safe storage.
Yeah.
We can get into the data on what safe storage and unsafe storage, what those things, how those things affect injuries, inadvertent injuries, children. And I'm not a pediatric surgeon, but I do take care of kids. They do come through. I'm connected to a children's hospital, and they are extraordinary, and they're great. Sometimes they can't make it to the children's hospital in time, even though it's right next door, and so they just come to the nearest hospital. So, but I definitely take care of their parents and their siblings and things like that. So. Yeah, I got a little bit off topic there. No, so that's the thing that compels me. The other thing is that, like, partly it's just my personality. I one of the things that I think really undermines the any sort of progress at all is a fear of actually having a conversation. Like there's no room for conversation because their emotions are so high. And my hope is just to keep the conversation going, because it's not impossible to have a conversation. We can talk about facts. We don't even have to argue.
Yeah.
We can just talk about what we know and have throw our shared, experience, meaning into a larger conversation that I think, and this is just me, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic here, but I don't think so. I think it gets us closer together to a shared understanding of where we're all coming from. Yeah. And it's a little bit not opaque, a little abstract answer to your question. But did I dodge your question appropriately?
No, that's great. Okay, that's great.
That is an honest answer. I mean, that's honestly probably.
Well, when you sent me a couple things before a couple days ago, sort of to read up, because I wanted to, educate myself as much as possible before we have this conversation. And I mean, just to throw out a couple of the stats, like right now, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, but daily in the United States, roughly 100 people die every day from gun violence.
Yeah, so that fluctuates depending on where you're looking, but that's probably a low end figure.
That's on the low end.
Yeah, that's probably on the low end, and it depends. So, can I riff off of that?
Go.
So one of the things that we've suffered from in terms of understanding. So we were talking about this being not a political issue, and what I'm coming at it as is a public health issue.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the metaphors are like vaping is a great metaphor. Seatbelts is another metaphor where you kind of run into issues of understanding about constitutional freedoms, but also public, what's good for the public. And those are interesting things in a democracy to have a discussion on. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not
and seatbelts is a great example.
Right.
We used to not have seatbelt laws.
Right.
In the beginning, we didn't have seatbelts.
Right.
And people were dying left and right in these automobile accidents. We as Americans have the freedom to put on a seatbelt or not put on a seatbelt. But people, as a consensus, we came together and approached it as a public health crisis.
Right.
And then we made some laws that said, hey, we got to keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
Let's all wear our seatbelts.
Yeah.
That's a law now.
That is a law now.
So that's an example of that sort of goes against this kind of deep-seated American individualistic free mindset, which is not a bad mindset. I'm not saying I'm against that, but I'm just saying sometimes we can feel like as Americans, well, this is a free country. We can do whatever we want, but we have lots of examples where we came together and we're like, well, maybe on this issue we should have some regulations. Maybe on the tobacco industry we should kind of crack down on this, and they shouldn't be able to run an ad in a on a
marketing to children.
Marketing to children, in the middle of a cartoon, you can't market tobacco, stuff like that. So
I think it was, I wasn't. I don't think. If you go back and listen to some interviews on when people were discussing making seatbelts a law, there was some of the arguments against it were very similar to kind of what we're talking about now. There isn't a constitutional statement on seatbelts as there is for firearms.
Yeah.
Which I think is important. I mean, it's important to the conversation. But it is that individualistic thing, which is important. I'm a proud American. I really am. I think that understanding those points of view are really important to the conversation.
I think the thing that always interests me, I'm trying to think of how to say this, when it comes to this subject, especially with guns, is kind of like, and I'm asking this. I'm not making a statement. I want to be really clear. This is a question, not a statement.
All right.
Because those are two very different things. I'm always curious, what is the percentage of people will never know this, but it's what I think about is like who feel so strongly about guns and gun ownership because it is out of a fear of what could happen to me. Or, you know, kind of that like Red Dawn thing where it's like what if we wake up one day to civil unrest, or there's a EMD has gone off in the atmosphere or magnetic pulse, EMP has gone off and you know, and it's just every
zombie
man for
apocalypse.
itself. Some crisis happens and you need to like protect yourself and your family. A fear of, so I need to be clear, a fear of things, like just kind of a innate, anything could happen, and that feels like a fail safe. What percentage of people fight so hard because of that, and then what percentage of people actually have proof of like, I need a gun in my life for, I can show you why. You know, I either work in this space or I've had something happen to me, or we've had threats on my family, you know, things that you go, okay, those are two different things. I'm just curious, like what that would be. We'll never know, but I think that's always a really fascinating thing to me. It's kind of like, and you know, because it sort of translates maybe into the seatbelts, where it's like, well, what if I need to get out, or I don't have time, or we're drowned? You know, car goes in a lake, like I can't unbuckle and then I die. Whereas if I didn't have a seatbelt, I'd get, you know, it's just like those are those things where I'm like, this conversation is really interesting to me because I'm like, I wonder, because I'm a human and I know how I work, of it is like, I just feel like I like knowing I can have it. I don't really have any data to prove the need for it, versus people who can go, no, I have the data to prove this is something I need, you know?
I don't know what I would say. I think we could get closer to understanding those questions. One of the things I tried to do, and I sent you a piece that I wrote with another trauma surgeon who I trained with on what our responsibility as trauma surgeons are. Probably because, you know, like I'm not a cardiologist looks up, you know, a lot of the pathophysiology, the reasonings for why you end up with the diseases that you end up with have to do with basic science, kind of things that you can learn in a lab. But what gun violence is about, the pathophysiology of it is socio-political, economic, that kind of thing. And so what my responsibility is to understanding when my patients get injured by gun violence, like what is my responsibility? How do I try to prevent that with the survivors who come to my clinic, who I see? And you have to tread lightly here. I do, and I probably tread a little bit more over the years I've tread less lightly because I wanted to ask. I risk wandering into territory where like either there's distrust of the medical system from my patient, or they're like, well, why are you asking? Like, why are you asking what I do with my guns? I've ventured out, and I've found surprisingly that people are a little bit more open with it. Sometimes people don't tell me the truth, but like, or don't want to talk about it. Sometimes people don't even know they were shot at by somebody they didn't even know. Right. And so like they're like, I don't know how to prevent this.
What would be an example of like a question that you would start asking your patients?
So a couple of so what we know from. So we'll just dive. I'll use this as an opportunity to bring in some of the data that we know that I sent you. Is that one of the things that we know about gun ownership is that it increases the likelihood of suicide attempts, and what in the medical world we've called completed suicides, or what we used to call successful suicides, which is kind of an ironic kind of combination of words. But what we mean by that is that like the attempt results in death. So what we know is that gun ownership increases that by 3 to 5 times. The likelihood of somebody attempting suicide if you have access to a gun. So usually that means gun in the home of the person who is using it. So whether that's a child who lives in the house, or whether that's an adult who owns the firearm, has access to it. Sometimes I'll have those patients in clinic, and I'll venture, and this is tricky, especially because you've got a lot of depression, you got a lot of psychiatric issues, of which I'm not that kind of doctor, but one of the ways that I will do that is to venture into, well, what happened to what are you doing about the gun that you used? Like, you just have to ask. And oftentimes there's some people will open up about it. And I'd say that the diversity of stories is quite vast.
Wow.
Of like, some people will answer me in a way that I don't have any power to take your. Nobody does, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can suggest, like, hey, you're in a good spot. We survived this. Maybe we can talk about what to do with your firearm until later.
Yeah.
May I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be an example. The other examples are when it has to do with domestic violence. So one of the things that predisposes people to gun violence or being a victim of gun violence is prior domestic violence. We know that, and so being around people who have access to guns or have access to firearms, whatever term you want to use, increases your likelihood of being hurt again or being killed in a subsequent attack, whether it's from that person or another person. And having the discussions, being willing to have that discussion in an outpatient setting or before they're discharged sometimes, discharged from the hospital initially. Those are really tough discussions to have. They're very tough discussions to have meaningfully because I'm not, like, they take nuance. And like, you always worry, I do anyway, and I think my partners would agree. I don't always do this, but like, that you're maybe potentially causing more harm than good by wandering in that. I don't know if that's true, but like, you wander into territories where like you're revealing a problem that I'm not equipped necessarily to fix.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I just want to, for a second, so we get, so these are segs. I think the conversation can go so many other ways, but it's worth reading all these stats, I think. So in 2015, over 36,000, I'll just kind of fly through these because, again, I think they're important to hear. In 2015, over 36,000 people died from gun violence, and that number exceeded the number of people who died from car accidents, which is crazy. 60.7% of those were suicides. Mass shootings account for 1% of gun-related deaths. Suicide is 65%. More people have died from gun violence than all the wars since the U.S.'s inception, which is 200. What are we at now? 1776, right? I mean, that's a long time. That's a long, long time. The overall rate of gun-related deaths for U.S. children younger than 15 is nearly 12 times greater than that found for the 25 other industrialized countries, and the rate of gun-related homicide is nearly 16 times higher than that of all the other countries combined. This is Miller and Cohen. The cost to society resulting from gunshot-related injuries totaled $112 billion in 92, which is a long time ago.
Yep.
There are more guns in the U.S. than people. I mean, that
includes babies, by the way.
Yeah,
that includes babies.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, I feel like just read those stats. You can just sort of end the podcast here.
Yeah,
it's like I don't know what else.
A stat that really was really meaningful to me. Well, like when you were talking earlier about, or Dave, you were saying like how many people just want to have a gun in the house for protection. And I completely get that. I mean, as a dad, I've got my wife's grandfather who was a police officer. I have his old nightstick next to the bed because, like that's a universal thing that we all have in common, not exclusive to dads, of course, but as three dads sitting in a room with families and kids, that's something I think about regularly. We've got our alarm system. We take all these precautions.
Well, and listen, living in Nashville, Tennessee, we've been broken into while we were home.
Oh.
I mean, like that, again, that was, that was before Ben. It was 12 years ago.
Wow.
13
but it's
years
a
ago.
reality
like that,
of life.
Yeah, like it happens.
Yeah.
I would be lying to you if I didn't say that I had thought about it.
Sure.
I mean, like I'm not a I'm not a gun owner, but I do like to go with a couple of my friends to go. What's it? Clay shooting.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fun. I'm terrible at it, but it is fun. Like I don't have anything against it, but like I'm bringing that up, not to like. I don't know what we're trying to bring that up. I'm trying to empathize with this idea as well of like I know what it means. I know what the data says in terms of like if I decided to own a firearm and bring it into my house, I know what it says in terms of what increase would happen with what the risks that my family what that incurs onto my family is if I were to do that. But I probably still think about it. I have my Louisville Slugger from when I was in Little League next to my bed.
Yeah.
Which isn't, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with that.
Well, but you sort of make the point,
Well,
right?
That's I can
literally the
empathize with
logic.
this idea. Yeah.
The logic is I don't necessarily know what I'm going to do with this, but it does
right.
help me sleep at
Yes.
night.
But that stat about, which is why I think it's so important to just know some of the facts. I think it's important, Dave, that you read through that, because just throw out any of the extra stuff that we talk about. Just no judgment at all. If you're going to buy a firearm to have in your house, on paper, here's the reality. Here's the risk you're running. Like if I had a gun in my house, if I could somehow know for sure that my children were not at risk, this firearm did not put them at risk, then that's a different story. If I knew that I would be able to, if someone was breaking into the house, I could have this gun on me. I'm not saying that I wouldn't. I mean, if someone's breaking into the house, I would like to have a gun to defend myself. So I totally get that. But it was a really meaningful stat to know, like, okay, if I bring this gun into the house, odds are way more likely that one of my children would find it and something bad would happen in that regard. The odds of someone breaking into my house, A, but then B, additionally, them breaking in and I'm actually able to
be cool
get
enough.
the gun, level head, I can make an informed decision then at that point. Without judgment, I can just make an informed decision. And I don't necessarily judge someone who, maybe someone grew up with guns and they're like, look, I hear the stats. I'm going to decide this.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's their decision. But I think it's just important to know the stats.
One of the things that John and I were talking about before you came over that I think is a really interesting way to iterate in this conversation too, because I do think there's so many things you can talk about, but the practicality of it to me is really interesting. And he was telling me that, and I think is really great for listeners too, is sort of like, what does this all mean? Because there's so much you can wax on about all of this, about how we feel and all those kind of things. But something that he mentioned about you that I think is so fascinating and potentially really helpful for listeners, I know it's been for me even in the last 30 minutes knowing this about you, is how, and I'd love to hear you speak to, is sort of like how this has informed how you think about your kids. So one being, just like how can people who potentially have guns in their house think about that?
Yeah.
That are maybe listening and going like, man, I haven't really thought through what that could mean because it's up in my closet and the kids can't get to it.
Yeah.
But I think that's one. And then two, how you will ask parents that your kids go to their house about, which I think is really interesting and actually triggers, like not trigger, maybe it does trigger, but it pings me because I'm like, oh man, I need to think about that.
Because that's not something that we think about.
No. But just like, so I guess one, like how would you speak to people who are listening going, oh, I know that my husband has a gun in the house, or the dad is listening going like, oh boy, I have forgotten that even that I have that pistol my dad gave me.
Yeah, right.
And then two, how would you encourage or how would you encourage parents to think about with our kids who are going to houses for that?
So, I'll start this with a story. When we first moved here, I think my oldest, I have 3 kids now, but I've my just the 2 boys at the time, I think that they were 5 and 3. We were over at a friend's house, still friends, and they happened upon the shotgun that was underneath the dad's bed.
Wow.
I didn't ask. Like, I'm a trauma surgeon. I was so horrified. They don't even remember. And I was talking about this. I was asked to give a little talk at a event a few months back, and they were like, "We don't remember that." And I was like, "Thank God you don't remember that."
Yeah,
because I do. I'll tell you what I have found. I've tried to not bring up that I'm a trauma surgeon because it makes it easier to be like, hey, I deal with gun violence. You got to tell me, like, I have a special story. And to try to see if it's easy enough to do, just as not having that history. I find that, like, if I ask with an honest curiosity about this, like, let me go back to your question. I ask almost all the time when we go over to somebody's new house, because we live in the South and lots of people own firearms, and I don't have any qualms with that. I do have qualms if my kids are floating around your house and you have a loaded pistol or something. I want to know that.
Sure.
I need to know that, because kids, that's a toy. It's a toy to adults sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And like, and which is, I mean, I see this all the time where people are futzing around with as adults, and I have had firearm safety. Let me make sure I'm not giving details here. It wasn't even in Tennessee, actually. I've had firearm safety teachers who have inadvertently discharged their firearm into their leg. Like, it just, and they were messing around. They just this happens.
Yeah.
It happens because, like, that's what they're designed to do, right? Yeah. Like, and so, but like with kids, like, it looks like a Nerf gun. Yeah, it looks fun. Right. It looks fun, and so you got to know that, like, hey, it's not you. It's just like, can you tell me, hey, do you own any firearms in the house? And if you do you mind? I actually asked to see it. I actually asked to see it. I'm actually curious about the firearms. I'm actually curious about what is their experience. Like, oh, where did you come up with that? Like, I don't know that much about firearms. I know a little bit about from going out clay shooting, and I grew up in Hawaii where there's lots of military. I had a couple of uncles who were actually in SEAL Team 4.
Oh, geez.
Fake uncles, like not blood related, but like funkles. Yeah, thank you. And so I grew up around it. Like, I actually like hearing people's, like, oftentimes they have really interesting stories behind it. If you can just kind of turn it into what I was talking about earlier, about like an opportunity to kind of like talk to people, it can be a little bit scary if you're like, I think if you're going into it with like, the question is, if your answer is, I own firearms, then we're out of here. I think that's tougher. I get that from some people. I can understand that because, like, firearms can be scary. But
I think it is good for people to be exposed to someone asking them, and not have the binary, like, oh, you're either for guns or you're against guns. You can have a non-judgmental curiosity about the guns, but also at the same time recognize, hey, my kids are here. This is serious. Like,
well, you know, too, that what it infers is like, hey, you need to be intimate with the fact that you own a gun.
Yeah.
So if you haven't really weighed what that means,
right?
And I'm not inferring that's bad. I'm just saying, like, it's a great question to ask somebody if they haven't just really onboarded. Like, oh yeah, I guess because I know this from my life. Like, we have a shotgun at our cabin that's not loaded. There's no bullets in it, but it's up, you know. And I'm sitting here going like, man, but it was given to me. It was like a grant, you know. It's like, there's a lot of that, especially in the South. Like, oh, it's my granddad's pistol, and he died.
And that's important.
It's very important.
That's important.
But I think if because it's happening to me real time right now, is two things are happening. Is one, I'm like, oh, I need to maybe think a little more about. Again, there's no bullets in the. I know that. I know where the bullets are, but you know that's not happening. But I'm sitting here going like, I need to sort of think about that,
right.
And because there are probably people who are there that don't know that, and that's important to know. But two, what you've done, and I need to do. I think I'm going to do this today when my kids get home. It's like I need to sit with them and go, hey, if you go somewhere. And now my kids are different because they went to Covenant. And I actually don't, as I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't really know how they feel about that, which is a whole other podcast for another time. But I'm like, I don't know how they feel about those things anyway, or what it would be like for them to see that. But I do need to sit with him and at least go like, hey, can we just have a conversation that if you're at a friend's house,
Yeah.
and they either find one or you hear one is in the house,
Yeah.
let's talk about what we do. Like, how do we, because I just haven't even thought about that. So when
Right.
John brought that up with you, I was like,
Yeah.
what a brilliant thing to have to think about. It's like, oh yeah, I need to sort of tell my kid if he's with a friend, that they go, look what my dad has. What do you do right then?
Yeah.
Well, and kind of like if you think about sending your kids to a new friend's house or whatever, especially young kids, and they've got a swimming pool in the backyard. It would be just assumed that you would have a conversation about that. And the conversation would not be
How dare you ask about my pool?
Yeah, there wouldn't be eggshells around that conversation. And I think talking to your friends, Allan, with the stance that you were describing helps kind of bring the gun conversation back to like where the pool conversation would be. Where the other person is thinking, oh, of course you would ask about this because your kids are going to be here for the afternoon. That's just a given. There's no judgment,
I'll tell you, I've actually had nothing but good experiences and good discussions with people with having asked that question. It almost immediately gets into either people are like, oh, thank you for asking. No, we don't. And then actually those are like the least interesting questions, the least interactions that I have. It's like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of circumstances where like I brought my daughter too young. I feel like maybe I think she's too young to have those conversations, but I brought my oldest son along with to be like, okay, this is what it looks like. This is what, and they're open to it of like, hey, yeah, I'll show you. Yes, we do. I keep the firearm deconstructed or taken apart, and it's in a lock safe in a room that the kids can't get to. Like this is the most intense. Actually, the person I'm thinking of is a West Point grad. Has a room that he keeps all of his that is locked that the kids can't get access to, and then the firearms are one safe. And then actually the ballistics, the bullets are in another safe in a different room. I think that was pretty intense. And I was like, that's great. I was like, well, maybe that's great. I feel safe.
Yeah.
And he knew a lot about things. He was willing to discuss it with I learned a lot about firearm safety. I haven't done this with my kids yet, but one of the additional things with my kids that we're set to do in the next couple of months is a hunter safety class that I don't want them to be, to your question, Dave, or what your comment earlier about like, well, one of your friends brings up a firearm, like, hey, this is my dad's. What do you do next? I need my kids. What I want is for them to not be excited about it. They know what it feels like to like to shoot or to feel what that feels like. That's just me. This is just me
kind
talking as a dad, not as a trauma surgeon, but as like trying to demystify and know like these things they're meant to destroy. Some of them are meant to destroy. They're meant to kill.
Yeah.
Like that's what they're designed for.
Yeah.
Whether it's hunting or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like I'm literally sitting here. Like I think just with our story, it's such a different thing because it's like our kids are very intimate with.
We're talking about covenant.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. We haven't had that. We've talked about obviously that in a lot, but not that. Oof. Not the gun specific part of it. You know what I mean? Like we've done, but it's interesting. I would be curious to know. I've never asked them that. I want to ask them that even today. Just kind of like, hey, when you think about that, because I would assume that with my three, they're like, no, we know well what those do, and we don't want it. We don't like seeing them, or it makes us think of things that are hard or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's so good. I just love that you're doing. I love that thought. I just love the thought of like, hey, there's two things to think about here that are immediately applicable. Which one is like, hey, when you're going to friends, or you especially have a kid spend the night with somebody, even if somebody well. I just feel like it's funny because there's so many ways people think about this. Because again, you have friends that are like, oh yeah, I have one. I forget to even have it.
Yeah.
It was a gift to me, or I bought it when I was freaked out one afternoon and I literally put it up and it's been in the safe or whatever, and they go, "Oh my gosh, I'm glad you asked me about that. Let me make sure I move that." Or, you know what I mean? Because that is a genre of people.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm in that with our shotgun in the cabin. And then two, there's people that, would be in the middle of that. And there's some who, like your friend, who are like West Point, they know guns. They're like, I can tell you, I know exactly how to dress it, undress it. It's over there. His is like, what do you need to know about guns? I can tell you, And so, but there's many colors of that rainbow of kind of people.
Yeah.
And so I think it's such a good, man, it's such a great reminder to go, oh, it's probably worth even asking some of my closest friends that we see a lot. Like, hey, I've just never asked you this. Do you have a gun here? Like, where is it? If so, like.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
No, please.
What's it like for you as a dad of Covenant
guns?
Kids? Yeah. What's that like?
I was talking to John about that before you came on. I was like, man, I'm sitting here like kind of feeling all these things. Definitely not for the first time, but in a long time. I don't know. I the thing that I think the most about probably when I think about this is knowing the shooter, because we were told what happened that morning, because they have footage of sorry, I need to be specific, of the shooting. Yes. Yeah. But before that, like knowing what she did and where she got, and that to me is really illuminating, because it's like, it's just a person going and getting some things. Like I would go get flowers somewhere.
Yeah.
There's no secret. There's no creeping around. There's no like, and that stuff is what really alerts me so much. I mean, forget the nightmare of what happened afterwards, but just the fact that the lead up is so open and out in the day. There's just no you know what I mean? And so I think for me, that's the stuff I find myself like, man, how do we get to that? How have we gotten there? One, and then two, like what can you do about, because it's one thing if it's like all in secret and it's all sneaky and they, like movie like where it's back alley dealings and some Russian czar who's like in some crazy James Bond movie that's moving stuff around the black market or something. But you're talking about like this is just wide open.
Yeah.
And so I think for me there is this onus, there's this real weight of like, man, that's really disturbing. That's unnerving to me. It's kind of like that. It's just like you can just wake up.
It's an everyday thing.
Yeah, you can wake up one morning and feel like this is what I'm going to do, and do it uncontested to a certain, degree. That's the stuff I found myself thinking the most about. I mean, and then it's like, but here's the other side, right? Like, thank God that the officers had guns.
Yeah.
Thank God that those, like.
Yeah.
So it's hard because you're like, part of me is like, God, what a train wreck, and then the other is like, man, thank goodness people know what to do with them.
Yeah.
So.
Well, when I was kind of researching up and reading some of the stuff that you had sent over, Allan, I had heard, because we have some of our really good friends are Australian, and so I knew a little bit about Australia's recent history with us.
Yeah.
But reading through some of just the bullet points is really, I don't know what, it makes me optimistic on one hand, it makes me sad on another hand, because, and the bullet points are, in 96, I think it was, there was the Arthur or whatever mass shooting in Australia. And within 2 weeks, which Dave, to your point, like, I assume it was a similar situation up until that point with gun laws and stuff like that. Then they have this mass shooting, and within 2 weeks, they pass legislation that cracks down on gun regulations, makes them tighter. They've outlawed certain, I don't know what the term is, like a bump. What is it? Bump something?
Bump stock.
Bump stock. And made it so that this is not, no one can legally obtain these things where they can then go and have a mass shooting. And so since then, whereas we've had 500 mass shootings to date this year. They've had 3 since 1996. And, and as I was reading some more, there was I think what you just said, the Dickey Amendment.
Yeah.
In, I think that same year, ironically, 1996.
Yeah.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, it essentially it prevented the CDC and the National Institute of Health from researching gun violence and pouring any money into the research of this stuff.
Yeah.
Which seems, it boggles my mind. I have no idea what the argument for that was. But then I was encouraged that I read that in 2018 and 2019, there have been some things passed through Congress that seem to be reversing that a little bit. That there was $25 million allocated in one of those years for the CDC to actually start doing some research.
I think that was in 2022. So Dickey, I forget what his first name was a congressman who passed this amendment that was passed this law, this Dickey Amendment that essentially functionally limited the amount of resources that the CDC and the NIH, so the two major, like all healthcare research is funded in the United States and outside of the United States, essentially through those two mechanisms. Without those mechanisms, you're essentially doing nothing. You're dependent on individual contributions or like fundraising. It's just like it's really a joke. It's either the NIH or it's really like you're not doing in healthcare research or public healthcare research. And the argument was anything that would go toward researching gun violence could potentially be used as an argument to regulate or limit access to guns, which was against the Second Amendment. So that was the argument.
Gotcha.
It sort of makes sense if you don't think about it. Again, it sort of makes sense if you don't think about it. What has happened though. Like, is that
what a great standalone quote? It sort of makes sense if you don't think about it.
What it functionally did was that it did restrict funding. So it didn't make it illegal to do gun violence research or firearm research, but what it did is it restricted the resources that would have made real. So all of the data that we have is really restricted by the fact that it has been essentially, there's been a chokehold, or it's been like the flow of money that makes research possible has been kind of suffocated for 20 some odd years.
So it's not illegal to do the research.
It's not illegal to do a research,
to do it.
But what it did was it made it so that you couldn't allocate the funds when NIH and the CDC was allocating funds toward different types of cancer or viruses or HIV or all those sorts of things. Yeah. Gun violence was restricted as one that you could allocate it toward. Now, the Dickey Amendment still exists. It hasn't been repealed, but we have in 2022, I think the CDC just started, and I'm not sophisticated enough to know why this happened, but I'm glad it has, because I think we've learned a lot from it. We still need a lot more headed toward gun violence type research and figuring out how to do it safely.
Yeah.
But not only the research safely, but to have firearms, as many as we do in the United States, which is more than one per human who exists in the United States, including babies, to have them here safely, is that we need research to figure it out. And I'm a public health guy. That's I like data. I like information. That's how I like to make my decisions. What has happened recently in the past 3 or 4 years is that the CDC and NIH has successfully directed funds, sizable funds, toward gun violence research, and it hasn't been a problem. Yeah. I think people. It's essentially fundamentally kind of an amendment that has not been enforced, essentially, because it still exists. Mm-hmm. I hope it goes away, because I mean, like, to me as a researcher, like, wouldn't you want to know? Don't you want to know?
Right.
Can research be misapplied? For sure. Yeah, of course. It's just like it's harder to do well without the money.
Yeah.
And so,
let's at least start with the data.
Yeah.
Then we can go from there.
One thing that I've thought about to your point, that I've thought about so much in the last couple of years or year and a half, is like, what I think would be really interesting, because the conversation that, of course, that you end up having a lot with dads, when you go through what we've been through, is like, what can you do, right?
What can you do?
What can you do? And I had this thought. I was like, what if? Because I did a paper on this in college, on how the tobacco industry had to. It's one of the most fascinating things I think that's ever happened. Is like that the government kind of came in and went, okay, big tobacco, you can do this thing, but we're going to make you spend your own money to try to convince people not to use your product, which to me is like one of the most hysterical and genius things of all time.
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't we do that with the gun industry? Why can't somebody come in?
That's a great point.
But like, why
parallel.
can't we come in and go, okay, Smith & Wesson, this train is way down the tracks, but what we are going to do now is you have to allocate whatever percentage of your annual income to anti-gun things or education or commercials.
I think education is the key.
Yeah.
Just say you're just educating the people on the product they just bought.
But I'm like, why is that not there yet? Because you kind of circumvent some things where nobody's having to quit making guns. Nobody's having to, and they can make all the ads they want to, but if it worked in big tobacco, why, and I actually had a conversation with a buddy of mine who works in that space, and he was like, I kind of wanted to have this conversation with some people in my space. But I'm like, that to me feels like, it's already been proven in one industry, and I think probably to some great effect. Why wouldn't it, even to your point, John, even if it was just education in schools or something where it's like, hey, we're just going to read those stats and have some conversations about what, it looks like suicides due to gun availability or, how many kids get hurt from shooting themselves accidentally in a home that has a fire, whatever the educational piece is. Yeah. I'm like, even for that. But I think that's where it gets overwhelming, is just kind of feeling like, what do you do about this kind of stuff? Because it just feels like when one of the things that your country has been founded on, granted a very different time from now.
It's very different.
Yeah. Extremely different. It isn't. It's a constant. So you're like, what do you do about this? And to me, it's like there's a couple things I've thought about, but I've just wondered why that's not something we can do. I'm sure.
Yeah, you're asking a political question to somebody who doesn't have. Well, it's a very good one. It's a very good one. Yeah, my job would be very different if it was all musket related. I think it would be very different. It was all just musket,
right? Just elephant, whatever those guns are. And it, I think too stay with me, but like I think about the Mike Tyson quote everybody uses, like, you don't have a plan everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
I do think people tend to not think about this much until it affects them ultimately.
Yeah.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this starts to matter. And I just get really nervous that in America that it's going to take a certain event or a person is affected that really does have the power to elicit change going through something that's really hard to actually enact some sense of like, we have to do something about this because it's just gotten too far, and that's the stuff that I grieve is I'm like, I just don't know. And, I'm not the guy that's like, we got to take everybody's guns. That's not at all what I'm saying. Right. I'm just saying like some sense of like, can we have some.
Well, that general idea that there are two binary options, I think is maybe top of the list of like elements we need to eradicate.
100%. 100%. Because it totally destroys the conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody wants to share with you what their real beliefs are. Right? Like if you are like, well, you have to have guns or you don't have to have guns, and then people won't share with you what their real thoughts are. It's like, I was attacked in my home and I have a gun because that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And like, of course that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if that's really, I worry that it doesn't actually make you safer, but maybe it does. But I totally get why you would think that way, because I have a little bat next to my bed right now because I don't have a gun, but like I kind of get it, and I've never been attacked in my home.
Yeah. I mean, Dave, I think that tobacco parallel is great. I mean, that And it makes me think like there are so many other things that we have. If you're going to buy some Oreos, it's right there. It's like, hey, every industry's hand has to be forced on this issue. You know, like they're not going to willingly advertise against their product.
Yeah.
But there's so many situations where the government has stepped in and been like, hey, you got to tell people, like, if you're going to eat an Oreo, you're not getting, here's what you're putting in your body. And then go from there, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, maybe this is a good way to land this plane, but I think, like, it's crazy when we go to church and school now, you know, forget me because I'm like a grown man and I can sort of metabolize this information, I think probably to a somewhat normal degree, but I'm like, you know, Covenant's probably like the most fortified school, much less church, probably in the country right now, genuinely. Like what we've had to do. But like, you know, the fact that there's security officers.
Yeah.
And granted, they're wonderful men, which is like such a because they're so sweet and all the kids love them and it's great. But you know, like that's my kids' experience now. I'm sorry, is you know that they have to walk by these men who are obviously dressed and what do you call it?
Sidearmed or whatever.
Yeah, strapped. That's what I was saying. Because whatever. But you know, they are wearing a gun, and that's normal to them.
Yeah.
You know, you're just like. It just makes me so sad. It's very heartbreaking. And so I'm thankful for that. I'm unbelievably thankful for it. But like the security systems we have in our church and school are just, it's insanity.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that like that's where we are now, it's just, man, it's like, how did we get here? And I tell you what, maybe the thing I've thought that's most, that you asked this question earlier is like how one person can make a decision that has catastrophic effects for years,
generations,
and years. And that's not limited to the people that die because of this decision. It's the families that have to grieve through the death of that person. It's the schools and churches that have to change tons of things, the people that leave those things because of the trauma, the family members that have to deal with one ring out of their grandkids, their nephews and nieces grieving and being, it's just like, that's probably the thing I've thought about as much as anything other than the grief fit. It's just like how one person with access to the wrong things, one person can make a decision that changes numerous people's lives forever.
Those bullets tear through more than just flesh.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think that's where I go, man, that is the weight of being a human is a pretty profound thing.
Yeah.
You know, like what free will can do is profound for amazing things and really scary things. Yeah. And I think like, you know, that's something I find myself a lot going like, man, that's crazy the way that works, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Dr. Allan Peetz, thank you for coming.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah. I really appreciate it.
John, we are friends. Best friends.
I've been holding my breath the whole time.
I really do enjoy you.
And thanks for wearing your spandex.
Yeah, you know what? I was like, I thought we were going for a bike ride, and all of a sudden I had headphones on.
Yeah.
And
it was a little bit of a bait and switch, but I think it turned out well.
I thought me doing lunges through the whole thing was good.
No.
Impressive.
The fact that you could not breathe hard while you did that reminded me of Justin Timberlake and his NSYNC height of fame when they were doing shows. And
well, they're Justin Timberlake spandex. So
yeah.
I saw his face.
That's what's bedazzled on the back. Anyway.